Hi guys, we're going to take a look at some animation now. We'll just do like a very basic animation. There is one thing that I want to kind of check out first though. It's still a little bit more housekeeping. What we've got down here, where we've got these letters and we've got two that are different heights to the others. We've got a G which hangs lower, and we've also got an I which sits higher. The problem with these is that their pivot points are going to be slightly above and slightly below where the other ones are. Okay, so what we're going to do is kind of reset all the pivot points for these manually and kind of adjust the heights of them. So I'm going to select all of the groups for those letters like that. And I need to jump into my front view, so I'm just going to pop down here. And if I hold down the D key on the keyboard, all right, it might be a little hard to see, but what we're seeing is obviously this handle on the currently selected letter, and we can see the pivot point locations on the other letters just here, and so you'll see that the G and the I are slightly out of line. Now if I grab this handle just here and move them up, you'll notice that they all move relative to one another. Okay, so they're not actually realigning themselves. They're still, this one's still remaining lower and this is still remaining higher. What we need to do is turn on grid snap just here, then grab this vertical handle, and that will realign them to a grid line. Then we can turn grid snap off and reposition these. And what we want to do is kind of place them as close to the vertical center of the mid-sized letters. So like A or M or N or E or Z. We want them to be as close to the middle point as we can. Now the reason for that, if I let go of the D key now, the reason for that is if we want to rotate these letters, we want them to kind of all spin in the same manner like this. All right, so you can see there that they'll kind of rotate around similar points. If we'd have left those pivot points above and below, these two letters would have not quite lined up properly when they were rotating. Okay, obviously if we're not going to rotate them, it's not really going to matter, but yeah, that's just something to be aware of that can occur with your pivot points. Alright, so I'm going to now kind of do a very basic animation on this. I'm going to start off doing a version of this where I'm just moving things and maybe rotating them. So I'm just going to save the scene so that I've got that those new pivot points saved. So I'll just save scene. Note that I'm still in my master file. I'm now going to save the scene as and change the name to animation. So we'll go File, Save Scene As, and we'll just change master to animation, and I'll give it a version number 001 in this case. Okay, so I can always go back to the master file if I need the object. Alright, so at this point usually we would have some kind of animatic that we'd be working from, which would give us an idea of what the actual logo is going to do. Okay, I'm just going to make it up as I go along. Okay, but you guys probably will have some kind of animatic to work from. All right. So basically, what we need to do is get the start position of all the parts of our logo. So what I might do is have maybe the word hype, kind of the word hype and magazine kind of fly into position, so into this position where they're already sitting, and then what I might do is have the logo maybe unfold or maybe scale up or do something like that. Actually what I might do is kind of have everything kind of set up like this and extend it out. Yeah, I think I'll do it that way. Alright, I'm going to take my my magazine. Okay, so I've got an icon group. I'm going to take the word magazine and I'm going to group those as well. Okay, so I'll just go edit group, and then I'll center the pivot point for that. So modify center pivot. Okay, so I've now got one group that I can select that whole word, so I can kind of move that around as a single piece if I need to. I'll call that magazine group. Magazine group, there we go. And I'll do the same thing with the word hype. So I'll select those by shift selecting them here in the outliner. I'll group them, so edit group, and I'll call that hype group, like that. And I'll center the pivot, so create, modify, center pivot. Okay, so what I'm thinking is I would probably like to have the logo set up like from this direction, like looking at it from here, kind of like it's a tower or some kind of building type thing. Then I want it to kind of rotate round and kind of squash itself back down into this logo size, and then have the words Hype Magazine kind of fly in past the camera. Okay, so what I'm going to do first of all is set up the word Hype and Magazine. So I'm going to take those two groups and I'm going to position them sort of forwards a fair distance over here, like that. And the camera is going to be set up somewhere in here pointing this direction. Okay, so we'll kind of pop that there. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two objects like this, and what I need to do is actually grab the icon group, and I'm going to rotate that so it's pointing upwards. So what I can do here is you can grab the rotate tool and just nudge it a bit. Okay, so I can see that its rotate X is changing and it's going into a negative value. So I'm going to type in -90 just there. All right, so that's my starting position. Now I also want to have this kind of set up like a pair of towers. So I'm going to select the actual object, and I'm going to jump into Bevel Plus just here, and I'm going to set the extrude depth. Now currently it's 0.5, but I do want it a lot bigger. So I can use the middle mouse button and expand it up to 4, and that's where it stops. But I can go higher. So what I'm going to do is maybe set that to about 15, roughly. Ooh, that's pretty big. Maybe back down a little bit, 10. Okay. And we can always come in and adjust this once we've got a camera in here. I'm going to do the same thing with this. So I just need to remember that it's actually at 0.5. That's my original value. So you can always note that down on a piece of paper or something like that. So in this case, I'm going to go maybe or maybe a value of 8, like that. So I kind of get a sort of an object which is sort of, you know, not quite uniform. All right. So I've got roughly everything where I need it to be to begin with. I just want to put a camera in here. So I'm going to come up to Create Cameras. And for this, I can probably just use a regular camera. So I'll just select that. All right, now in this case, it's hiding inside the object because it'll appear in the middle of the grid, and that's where this is at the moment. So I'll just grab the Move tool and I'll pull this camera back. Now what we will want to do is actually look through this camera so we can see that everything is fitting inside the scene and it's all lining up and everything. So what we can do is go to Panels, Perspective, Camera 1, and that's currently what we're looking at through the camera. If I hit my resolution gate just there, I've currently got this set up to 960 by 540, but that's the same proportions as my 1280 by 720 HD render as far as the width and height. So I can leave it at that just to kind of set things up. So I'm going to grab my translate value here on this camera, and using the middle mouse button, now I need to deselect for a second. Actually, it's going to be a bit of a pain doing this. We can actually just use regular keyboard navigation. Okay, something like that. Just kind of position it. You could just select that and press F and then just zoom out a bit. That'll center it. If you grab your camera, just hit select camera and then go to the channel box. You can just make sure your translate X is set to 0. This is assuming, of course, that you've centered your logo the way that I did when I was constructing it. All right, note that my rotation values for the camera are set to 0. This is basically a fixed camera, so the camera's not going to be animating in this case. All right, so yeah, that's about right, something about that. Okay, so now what I want to do is create a copy of this viewport. So I'm going to go to Panels, and I'm going to hit Tear Off Copy, like that. So what this is basically the camera view that I'm looking through, and this is going to work like a little viewfinder for my camera. Okay, so I can kind of just shrink that down and pop it into the corner somewhere, like that. And now what I can do is set my main viewport back to perspective. So I can work in this viewport like this, and I can see what the result from moving the objects and so on is having over here. Okay. So now what I want to do is make sure my settings are kind of set up for animation. So I'm going to go down to the bottom corner, click on the little animation settings options. We'll come up to here and select settings. Make sure that in this case, I think what I'll do is use PAL 25 frames per second, just here. Everything else should be fine. I'll just save that. And now I need to reset my start and end frames. So I'm just going to go a value of 1 just there, and just move the indicator back to 1. Over here at the moment, you know, I might want this animation to go for, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 seconds. So, you know, it might be 150 to 175 frames perhaps. I might just set this to 150 to begin with, or 200 will do. Actually 200, and just make sure this end frame is 200 as well. Okay, that just gives us a pretty even setup. All right, so now what I want to do is start animating some of this stuff. So what we're going to do is start off by basically rotating the logo piece, the icon piece up here. We're going to have that rotate back into position so it's facing the camera, and we're also at the same time going to have it shrink back down using the extrude value that we've changed. So let's start off by having the extrusions drop. So I want a little bit of time at the beginning of the animation for the audience to be able to kind of see what they're looking at, so to kind of look at this. Okay, so what I might do is go to about frame 25. That'll give them about a second of this to be able to register. You can go higher, it doesn't really matter. Okay, once again, you'd kind of, you know, if you're doing this as a full-blown project, you'd actually have this worked out duration-wise on your storyboards and stuff. Okay, so let's grab the one extrusion piece first of all. So we can kind of jump into there. I'll grab the attribute editor, and we want to find that bevel plus tab just there. And so I've got my indicator on frame 50, and I need to set a keyframe here for the extrude distance to tell the computer that this is how high the extrusion is at frame 50. So where it says extrude distance, I'll right click and I'll hit set key, and the number will go red. I'll also do the exact same thing for this object because I want these to kind of shrink at the same time. So we'll go extrude distance, set key. Okay. Now nothing will actually appear down here. You won't see any indicator on the timeline. So you just need to remember, in this case, it's frame 50 for those. Okay. Now, what I want to do is also have this rotate as well back into position. So I'm going to select the icon group like that, and over in the channel box over here, I'm going to right click on the word rotate X, and I'm going to hit key selected, and that's going to keyframe the object just there. Now I need to work out how long I want this rotation for this to rotate back into its position and this to shrink down back into the correct position. I need to work out how long I want that to take. So let's say it's going to take 2 seconds. I would move 2 seconds up the timeline, so that would be frame 100, And I would then rotate this into position. So I would set this number back to 0, and that'll drop this down. And I need to keyframe that again. So I right click and hit key selected. And you'll note that the timeline indicator drops a keyframe in. Now if I scrub between that, I can now see the logo rotating into position, like that. Now I also want the extrusion to shrink as well. So I'm going to select one of my objects. We'll pop back over into the attribute editor, and we want to find that bevel plus tab just there. And we want to set the extrude distance back down to what it was originally. For me, that was 0.5. Note that I'm still on frame 100. So I'll go 0.5, and that'll drop the extrusion back, and I need to now re-keyframe that. So I right-click on the word extrude distance and hit set key. Now if I scrub through that, you can see that that now does that. And I'll also do the same thing over on this one. So I'll set that back down to 0.5 and right click on that and hit key selected, or set key I should say. Alright, so now I get both of those kind of swinging down and rotating. And you can see the effect that that's having. It's got this kind of weird, kind of parallaxy, kind of perspective shift type result. Okay. Also note that it's much lower in the frame than it needs to be. It should actually be up here somewhere. Okay. What we're going to do is adjust the, we'll actually animate the camera position last, once everything's in place. Okay. So with that kind of shrinking down, I also want to have the text start moving into position. So I might start maybe about frame 85, and I'm going to take the hype and magazine groups, both of those, and don't forget that they're sort of back behind the camera over here. All right, and I'm going to keyframe those in their position. So over here on, in this case, translate Z. Okay, I'm going to hit right click, key selected, and you'll note that we get a keyframe indicator. All right. So that's, you can see that that's moving down in the position. I want this text to end up below the icon just after it's actually moved into position. So it reaches its position at frame 100. I want to overlap that a little bit. So I might go to about frame 125, and I'll reset this value back to 0. So it's going to jump back to its original position. So 0. So now the text is in position again. And I keyframe that. So I'll right click and hit key selected. So now we kind of get this kind of shift down, and then the text comes in underneath. Now obviously, in this case, the camera is completely out of position. So we're also going to have to make sure the camera shifts as well. So as this object kind of rotates in and gets much shorter, we can start to drop the camera down. So I'm thinking maybe about 70. We'll select the camera. We're going to move it up and down, or it's actually going to drop. So that's going to be the y-axis. So we'll keyframe the camera there. So translate Y, keyframe selected. And then I know that this object basically settles on frame 100. Like that. So what I want to do probably is have the camera reach a nice frame position, or a nice composition around about frame 100, maybe a little bit before, so the camera stops moving before that object does. Okay, you could have it even after. You could kind of have the camera drop in a position just as the text passes underneath it. So somewhere about there. And then what we'll do is actually physically move the camera down like that. And you can see that the type is starting to drop into the frame like that. And we can right click and hit key selected. So now what we get is this object kind of rotating in a position. It swings up and the text drops in like that. Now, in order to play that back at proper speed, we need to right click over on the play button, go to playback speed and make sure it's set to real time. or play every frame maximum real time. I've got a pretty quick computer, so I'm just going to go real time. And if I've got my perspective view over here selected, I can now play that back. So I'll just rewind it. So this is what we start with, and then when we play, that's basically what we get. Now what we can do is actually adjust, we can make adjustments to that. So for example, let's say I want the word magazine to trail after the word hype. Okay, I can select that magazine group just there, and I can actually move these keyframes inside the timeline and delay them maybe by 10 frames so that the word hype comes in and then the word magazine comes in after it. So to move keyframes on a timeline, hold down Shift, click just ahead of the first frame and drag across the timeline until you're across the second frame. Then what you can do is use the two arrows in the middle, click and drag on them and move left or right. So in this case I want to delay it by maybe about 5 frames. So about there. So you can see the hype comes through and then magazine comes through after. To deselect this area, just click somewhere in the timeline. So then what I can do is just rewind, press play, and we'll see that drop. The word hype comes through and then magazine after it. So it adds a little bit more of a dynamic movement. Okay. Now let's say we want to take the hype object, the hype text, and we want to rotate that a little bit. Okay, this is where things start to kind of change a little bit more. So what I might do is rotate the word. So I've got the hype group selected. I'll grab rotate. Note that all the rotations are 0. Okay, what I can do is kind of tilt this forward like this, so it kind of looks like it's flying in that direction. And on this frame where it starts to move, I'll right click on the rotate value that's changed. So in this case it's rotate X, and I'll hit key selected. Then what I might do is maybe go a couple of frames before it reaches its final location. Okay, and I'll set that to 0 so it's upright again, and then I'll keyframe that. So I'll right click and hit key selected. Alright, so what will happen is it'll kind of zoom in now. I'll just turn off the move tool or the rotate tool. So what will happen is it will kind of zoom in, and as it's flying past the camera, it'll kind of rotate up into position and then kind of lock in at the end. Like that. And you can see sort of what that's doing down here. You can see that it's pretty tilted there, and as it gets closer to its final spot, it actually straightens up. So from the side, basically what we're seeing is kind of very almost horizontal, and then it rotating and ending up at 90 degrees sort of just before it lands in position. So you can do things like that as well. Okay, so that works quite well. I'm pretty happy with that. I'm just going to turn off that camera viewport for a second. I'll just save that file as well. So we'll just go File Save or hit the Save button. And what I might do is export out a play blast. A play blast is like a rough animation file. It doesn't have any rendering of lights or shadows or things. It just basically renders what you see in the viewport. It's almost like a screen capture of the viewport. So what we can do is just go back to camera 1, like that. And what we'll do is we'll do a separate video exporting out a play blast. So basically, yeah, what we're seeing from the actual camera's perspective is something like that. Now, obviously, you know, you can play around with sort of, you know, all the different settings, animate, you know, your objects, you know, in different ways. It's up to you. Explore and have a play around with some of those techniques. and see, you know, what you can come up with that's different from the way I've done it. Yeah, I'll leave this here, and in the last very short video, we'll run through exporting a play blast.